The Holy Gospel according to John, the 3rd chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said, "Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who believes in him may not perish, but may have eternal life. Indeed, God did not send the Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Those who believe in him are not condemned, but those who do not believe are condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of the only Son of God. And this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and people love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For all who do evil hate the light and do not come to the light, so that their deeds may not be exposed. But those who do what is true come to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that their deeds have been done in God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Amen. Okay, so let's be honest, shall we? How many times in life have you been creeped out by snakes? I can tell a few stories about that. I remember one time going bow hunting in eastern Kansas with my dad. We lived along the Missouri River. We were hiking along a hill and a trail in the woods when a giant diamondback rattler crossed the path. We never even got to see the head or the tail. It just went on and on forever, big, huge road. We creeped out and went the other way. Which reminds me of another time when I saw one out there. I thought, well, maybe I'll just kill it. So I shot an arrow, missed, shot another arrow, missed, and the snake just wrapped itself around the arrows until I had to go home because I was out of arrows, and the snake had them. My dad grew up on a farm in Joe Davis County, Illinois, called the Dotzel place, which is now underwater. He keeps talking about, over the lifetime, about the huge snake pits that were on the farm, these pits, these rocky areas where the snakes would come out by the dozens in the springtime and sit there to warm up, and how that creeped him out as a child. And I remember once, as a student at Bethany College, sitting in the grass along the Smoky Hill River in the Salina Park one day. It was a beautiful spring day, and the grass was kind of tall, and I was leaning against a tree watching the water flow, and suddenly this black head popped up. And then another one, and then another one. And there were like a dozen looking at me, and I was creeping out, and then they all got scared and slithered down into the water and swam away. And I went, "Whoa, what was that?" No doubt many of you have experiences like that too. Which is why we shouldn't be surprised, I guess, by biblical stories that make snakes out to be the bad, the evil. We can't avoid that theme today. But I don't want to go into a great deal about it, about the snake and the symbol of the snake, Moses' serpent on the pole, which, by the way, is very similar to Greek mythology and the rod of Asclepius, both of which became a modern medical symbol, which you see at your doctor's office sometimes. Or what happened under King Hezekiah 700 years after Moses, when that symbol, that snake on the serpent pole, was destroyed because people were worshiping it as an idol rather than God, according to 2 Kings 18. Don't want to talk about all that. What strikes me about both the Old Testament and the Gospel today is the way in which that scary image of serpents threatening our existence suddenly becomes a symbol of new life. So, it says in Numbers, Moses made a serpent of bronze and put it on a pole, and whenever a serpent bit someone, that person would look at the serpent of bronze and live. And of course, the gospel says that Jesus became lifted up like the serpent on the cross in order to give us resurrection and new life to come. Images have a great deal of power, do they not? Especially when it comes to imagining where God is in the world or how God is present in our experience. So, did you see the photo I included this week with my email devotion, huh? Okay, I got a little carried away with reporting about the FX TV series called The Americans, about Soviet spies in the U.S. during the 1980s, and I hear it's based on reality. It's fiction, but it's based on truth. So, you can imagine how that really caught my attention this week. The C in the title, The Americans, is depicted as the Soviet hammer and sickle, which you've all seen before. So I imitated that in my devotion by hanging a hand sickle upside down on the cross that hangs on my wall. All right, and it's not just any cross, it's a crucifix, which I bought in Nicaragua that was a Soviet ally in the 1980s. Now think about that, huh? So, there's the photo. Looks like the sickle put Jesus there on the cross, threatening to destroy his life forever like a poisonous snake ready to bite. Or it might be a symbol of how Jesus' presence in the midst of our human suffering and death transforms everything by trimming away all that distracts us from God. Think about that. Now, I thought I would get a big email reaction to that image when I posted it, either positive or curious or negative, but maybe it was just a little too obscure. I don't know. Which, in all honesty, is what life is, even at its best, obscure sometime. No sooner are we doing well when something unbelievably bad can happen. No sooner are we feeling confident, competent, and strong when all kinds of self-doubt can emerge. No sooner are we happy and fulfilled when suddenly we're feeling sad and unsure about the future. Illness and disease can happen. Economic or political realities can change. For goodness sakes, your house could burn down at any time. What else? Life can be mysterious. At such moments, we can be like the Israelites in the Numbers story, complaining about God and Moses or anyone else who's really our support and companion in life. Or we can be like Nicodemus in the John chapter 3 story earlier on, who hears Jesus' message about hope and new life, but only sighs and mutters, "How can these things be?" The deadly serpents are waiting to jump out and bite us when we least expect it. The sickle of life is hanging above our heads, waiting to cut us off from anything good. Unless, of course, we see it differently. That's what Paul is saying in our second lesson. All of us once lived in the passions of our flesh, following the desires of flesh and senses, and we were by nature children of wrath like everyone else. But God, who is rich in mercy, out of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead through our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved. So, back to my email devotion about the Russian spies in the American TV series pretending to be U.S. citizens. They lived as a middle-class family in Northern Virginia and had 2 teenage children who did not know that their parents were spies until they were exported back to Russia. The adults work during the day and spend their nights doing whatever it takes to steal information about U.S. foreign policies. They're out there murdering and breaking into places and stealing and even having sex with anyone it takes to get the job done. Much to their chagrin, their daughter has become a Christian, baptized and active in a church that is, well, radically progressive in social justice and equality for all. The parents are mortified by her religious choice, but they can't quite reject everything she stands for, so they're confused. The father, using every means available to manipulate and control others, takes advantage of his daughter's religious experience. He's been seeing this young woman who's actually the age of his daughter, trying to seduce her because he wants to get in her house and steal her father's secret U.S. spy stuff. He feels a little guilty about trying to sleep with her when she's so young, so he tries something else. He pretends to have a religious conversion and invites her to pray. And in the process, she has a profound religious experience. Now, is that a gospel story? Not if you judge by the Russian spy's behavior. But what about the young girl? And what might be happening in that Russian soul that makes him change his immoral behavior in order to give her a break? One of the ancient controversies of the church was known as Donatism in the 4th century, a question whether or not the authenticity of the gospel depends on the motivation of the preacher or the priest or the pastor. And the classic conclusion was, for the majority of Christians, was no, it does not depend on what the preacher means or does. What matters is how the heart of the believer is changed, not what the preacher thinks or does in the process. Snakes abound in our world today. Reptiles of every sort, small and great, poisonous or not. Our hearts are not perfect by any means, and none of us are truly innocent of selfish behavior. We try to move ahead, take advantage, preserve ourselves, and secure our future at all costs, even to the point of blaming God for what doesn't come. But if we just look up and see that God is in everything, even in the snakes, in health or sickness, in life or in death, in happiness or sorrow, we may see that God the Almighty, the Creator, the Judge, the Giver and Sustainer of life, the truth of all that is good, is on our side even more than we know. And when that happens, we might be able to discover the love and beauty of every human being and every living thing, even the snakes.